Hello, and welcome to Life Rhythms, Tarot, Food, and Spirit. It is February 2nd, Candlemas or Imbolc, and I have been really missing connecting through the interwebs this way. But the last half of January has really been quite a ride, and I don't think that I'm alone in or on that journey or on the wave that seems to have been coming up to this big crest and over with the long-awaited and much, anticipated full moon that occurred with the eclipse, in it being in Leo, and this first time in a 152-year event, and so much energy for myself pulled up and really crested right at those moments around that time earlier this week, and then it's been like this little kind of slope downward and beginning to feel a little sense of grounding. And I wasn't actually even anticipating having the energetic space to sit for this today, but I have, and so I wanted to take the opportunity to just talk a little bit about the month of January, a bit of a January wrap-up. And so, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, January was really quite a ride for me, and funny that I'm saying ride because my card of the month, now where did you go to, was the Chariot, or as is expressed here through the Margaret Peterson Tarot, the Chariotress. And as I experience the Chariot, it's really about how the journey is being taken. Your vehicle, and the vehicle of the body, and where it's carrying you to, from and to. And in some ways it's very simplistic, but there are many layers that can occur just with that one idea. And so for me, I think, as I've shared before, I often will make some cards falling out here, a list of days, each day of the month, and then, put a word for each, one word or maybe a small phrase for the card of the month, just as a touchstone, as a way of touching in, because every day you can't get to everything every day. But in general, the theme for me was the journey from unknowing to knowing, and that around my very specific situation, I had some tests, some medical review tests, and they took place last week, so right before the full moon. And so it was this unknowing of what was happening. And it's so strange when we engage with Western medicine, which I really never did until my current situation with dealing with cancer. And, you lay your own innate wisdom, to some degree, becomes like very confused because you're waiting to hear what they're saying. Now, I personally probably do that much less than the average person, simply because my mind was never trained on engaging in that way. But still, it's a very potent and powerful medium, and so you do get very drawn in and wondering, and I know I was feeling one way, and yet, you're waiting. And so for me, there was definitely that ride and watching myself in the moments leading up to that, the days and really the weeks leading up to that, of which side of the river was I on? Was I on the side of being with my innate wisdom and trusting my body, which I feel is so paramount to any type of healing, real healing, because there is healing of a situation, or perhaps healing from having a cold, but what was the underlying situation that led up to that event? And so the real healing comes into place when we're in that getting back to the core of the self, and what are you trusting and what are you listening to, and ultimately I feel that even in Western medicine, that if you're working with somebody who doesn't support you into listening to your own self, then perhaps one might want to consider not working with somebody who believes they're God, because God exists nowhere but inside the self. And maybe that's something, okay, whatever, I'm saying it. So that's my feeling. And so watching which side of the river I was on, and like the chariot where you're carrying me back and forth between the sides, and sometimes it just felt like a rickshaw, and sometimes it felt like I was in this, plush divan, going over to the side of trust in myself. But so it was my card of the month, and so we landed on the side of trusting in self, and what the self was telling me was true, and so everything has turned out to be stable for the moment. So there's an exhale along with that, so that's good. So it's my card of the month, and so some of that was, all of that was jamming me up to be able to sit and think about talking about other things, or sharing of other things. But other things that happened in January alongside of that journey were a couple of new decks, and one is the Darkness of Light. And I really, in a way, have to say that I got this deck a little bit on impulse, because it's not something that I really thought on the whole would be a deck that I would resonate with. But I'm not going to take it out of the box. It's actually a little bit of a difficult box to open, and I don't want to jam it up here. But I love this deck. It has the images are just for me very gothic and darkness of light. They're and I find, I don't know if anyone else finds, that certain decks I tend to draw certain suits from that deck all the time, and just look for the little bit that I've had the Darkness of Light, it seems to be a deck that's offering me swords to think about. So there's that. And then another deck that I received was the Tarot Droga, and I received this through the lovely Kasia, and so some of the cards from this deck, and I feel very fortunate to have gotten this deck. It wasn't one that was certainly available. And here's the World, which is actually my card for the year. I'm not going to talk about that today. Still absorbing that that potential in my life. And in this deck, I seem to be drawing a lot of pentacles. So this seems to be a deck of a lot of earth for me. And then the other deck, and the only other deck I took on for January, was the Red Seeds Oracle. And this is really a beautiful, the images. I will say that I don't particularly love the backs with all of the information on the back. I kind of wish that that came in a booklet, and that the backs were just neutral. But the images on the front are spectacular for me. Line drawings, very lush, very organic, very feminine, and really speak to that energy that I'm working with so much, not just with myself, but in my work and holding circles with women. So that deck is fantastic. And other things this month were a couple of books, and these two books in particular on green witchcraft. Now, for as long as I really remember, since I was really pretty young, in my early teens, I've had altars. I've been drawn to following the cycles of the moon and the holy days of the witches' calendar, the pagan calendar, and I've always held space for some kind of practice of that sort. So we're a little random here. Green witchcraft, folk magic, folklore, herbcraft, and Mura. I don't know that I'm saying that correctly, but I have her green witchcraft. Must be the first, and then this manual, which is the third, and I do have the second book as well, but I'm not working with that as much. But I have to say, in all of my years, so that's now about almost 35, almost 40 years of working solitarily and with books and with guidance from books, and some collaborative practice as well. These manuals and books have really helped me, just in the short time that I've been working with them, kind of bring my practice into a much more cohesive state. So it's really been a rich addition to my work. So if anybody out there is kind of dabbling, or I don't know, wherever you are, even if you're kind of deep into practice already, but maybe you have her books, but I highly recommend them. And there's the Green Witchcraft 2, and then there's a bigger manual book, but these seem to be the two that I'm working with the most. And so they've really helped me make more tangible sense of the practice and the work that I'm doing with the practice. And kind of through that, and also through kind of inspiration on Instagram especially, many years ago I worked a bit with runes, and I hadn't really ever fully connected with them, and but have been drawn to start working with them again. And so two books that I've been reading a bit as I've been more intuitively feeling into them, and I'm actually very fascinated in working with them as an old alphabet or an old language. So in a way I have that perspective going on that's a little bit separate, but The Runes Revealed by Ingrid Kincaid and Lara Vesta has done the drawings for this, the artwork for this, and then one that's probably familiar with those who work with runes, Rune Lore, The Magic History and Hidden Codes of the Runes by Ingrid Thorson. So those books have come into play a bit in January, or quite a bit in January, so those are some new energies that I've been working with this month. And then I've also been really wanting to focus and rededicate my altar spaces and to have them be much more intentional. And so in the entry space to our apartment, I have a piece that I've had for many, many years, probably about 20 years, and that's kind of always been my altar, my main altar space wherever I've lived. And so I have always had a beautiful Kuan Yin on there, and so she's there, and I've been, and to be frank, it's always been the everything altar. She's there, but then everything kind of has always happened on that altar. And now that it's more of a static place, I was like, Kuan Yin, you know, what is she to me? This goddess of compassion, and really the water element, the heart space, and compassion is always what comes to me with her. And so that led me to really investing in a major rose quartz pillar, and that was too much for me to bring over. But I also I'm very connected to apophyllite, and so I, along with the rose quartz, have this wonderful soft energy of apophyllite over there with her, and as well as some dried roses and sage, and I've also begun to hand make my incense again, which is something that I did for quite some time, for quite many years. And so now that my hands are becoming a little bit more fluent again, I made this particular incense for today, for a ritual that I worked with today for Candlemas. And so this incense is lavender, rosemary, and bay leaf. And so I've got natural incense burning over there now. And I have to say that it's been such a pleasure to come back to work with the scents in this way. And that if you make your own incense, there's, of course, with the resins and things, you need the mortar and pestle to grind those. But I would invite everyone to use your hands as much as you can to release each scent into your hand and then into the bowl as you're making it, and then, you know, of course, to put it on the charcoal and to let that smoke rise, and you really get that fire and air energy and element going up. And so that's just been a beautiful element. So those have been some things that I've been working with this month. And you know, along with this wild crest of the full moon that just happened, and I was feeling like so much of this pull of like, why can't I get myself together? And I actually feel like I missed the full moon to do a ritual with it, and I did my ritual with it actually just yesterday after the full moon, and was actually thinking of writing a piece on this pressure we put on ourselves to, and somewhat in awe of people who like get everything on every date, and or seem to. And this is one of the tragedies of social media is that, you know, and I think many people get this impression that everybody's like so on top of everything and able to keep on in rhythm and on time, and with how everything is happening in the outside world, and where the stars and the moon are aligned, and then this thought of where we should be in relation to that. And ultimately, like, having to pull myself back and say, whoa, you know, woman, what do you try to share with people about rhythm and inner rhythm? And that it all comes back to being aligned with our own internal rhythms, and that's where it begins, to breathe and to sense and to feel into that. And that's not always so easy, because our world just isn't crafted that way any longer. And so to have the time and the space or the intention, even with what little time or space you may have, to draw yourself back in, to listen and feel your own heartbeat, and to listen to your breath, and to maybe put your hand on your belly and feel the rise and fall of that, and to know where you are, where I am, where we are in any given moment inside, and then, you know, appropriately integrate that or respond to what's happening outside. And then perhaps ultimately, when we're not interfered with all of the electromagnetic energy and news and TV, or thinking about our Instagram or YouTube channels and all this doing, but when we get back to that deep rhythm of being, then maybe, you know, you would just naturally get everything in line to feel ready to celebrate and align with the full moon and the new moon at those very moments. But to have some compassion, going back to Kuan Yin, for ourselves, for myself, about like, oh, you know, the rhythm just isn't always right there in step with the natural world, because we are not. As much as we want to have these practices, most of us are not in step with the natural world, with our feet on the ground, with our eyes on the stars, with our hands in the dirt. And all those things are such aspirations, and those things have been living right alongside me very much this month, as aspirations and hopes and intentions where I can direct my life more to, in the course of this year, and step by step, reminding myself it's step by step. And so I think that was kind of much of what my January was, working with the Chariot, refining my altar spaces, living through this wave of from the unknown to the known, and then having a lot of it anchored by more being able to work more intentionally with my green witch practices, getting my hands into the herbs, even though I can't get them into the dirt quite yet. Waiting for spring. I'll be ready for that with spring. And happy to be able to be here now and honoring myself, and hoping that you will honor yourself in your own rhythm, knowing that we will land and interconnect this way when the time is appropriate, and having some intention to really listen to the inner self is what I leave myself with in January and lead into February with. And so I think I will leave it at that. And I am intending on finishing up the 31 days of Chariot, the video response to Ethany, this weekend. So a little bit late, but I want to finish up those responses. And until we meet again, be well, and with much gratitude to this community.